Hello, and welcome to another Behind the Poem story. Today's story is about a poem called Get Real. Now, the irony of this poem is that the purpose of it may be altered by more modern interpretations. And this is where I would argue that meaning does not necessarily end with creation. It does not, any poem can be changed and reinterpreted and misinterpreted by times changing. So the poem Get Real is the one I want to talk to you about this week, and it has absolutely positively nothing to do with fake news, any of the conspiracy theories that are out there, any of the arguing over real facts or supposed facts or scientific facts or any of that kind of stuff. When I wrote this poem, the original version of the poem was written a very long time ago, so I promise it has absolutely nothing to do with any of that intentionally. But what we as poets need to be prepared to do, what we as writers need to be prepared to do, is accept that once we have written something down and released it into the world, it may be misinterpreted or the meaning might be changed by someone new who reads it, who's in a different socio-historical context than we were when we wrote it, we were when we published it, we were when we're thinking about it. I'm going to talk to you mostly in the story today about the original version and the original intentions I had when I wrote the poem. You, as the reader, are free to take the poem and read any meaning into it or get any meaning out of it that you choose. But my original intentions were not about kind of modern events and modern ideas about whether facts are facts and truth is truth. The poem Get Real was intended to talk about how our perception of certain things, our perception of reality, can be somewhat relative, especially when you're dealing with abstract concepts and the possible. So there is a famous quote about everything is impossible until it's not. And the idea behind everything is impossible until it's not is we as a species evolve and create and invent and imagine, and then we make it happen. This is particularly true of one of my favorite genres of TV, which is science fiction. I'm a huge Star Trek fan. Sorry if that bothers anybody, but it's the truth. I have been since I was a child. The number of people who are in NASA, the number of people who in medical science have changed things, in technology have changed things, it is absolutely unarguable that science fiction shows like Star Trek, science fiction things like Battlestar Galactica and like Star Wars, the things which have inspired scientists to make reality what they see in fiction is unreal. And that goes all the way back to what is arguably one of the first science fiction novels, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein from the 1800s. She's talking about organ transplant. She's talking about resuscitation of someone who has passed on. She's talking about improving the health and vitality of human beings through medical use and electrolysis and transferring of body parts and reattaching limbs, and that is what she's talking about 200 years ago. And of course, people back then thought it would never be real. They thought it would never happen. Even all the way back to things like, Macbeth talking about no man born of woman. Cesarean section was seen as unnatural birth. All the way through humanity's time, centuries and centuries and centuries of writing and imagining and picturing a different reality and then making it happen is so powerful and so real. So when we tell someone to get real and they tell us to get lost, that's why. Especially when we're dealing with something like an abstract noun, things like justice, things like love, things like hope, things like change. Not all change is good. Not all love is healthy. Not all social change is for the better. But we have to keep trying because we'll never get it right if we stop trying. And this concept of just accepting the reality of a situation, I refuse to do it. I support a lot of the social change that's happening right now. The Time's Up, the, Me Too, the Black Lives Matter, all of these things are changes in society that have been coming for a very long time. They are people who have been told get real or be realistic and have told them to take a walk. So, we are reflecting constantly, and imagination is what's important when it comes to reality, because how much technology could come into being because people imagined they could make it work? How many apps or advances or aids to humanity's existence have happened because of necessity, have happened because somebody imagined, okay, we need to do something about that. How do I make that work? How do I make that happen? How do I make people less ill? How do I make them more beautiful? How do I make them feel better about themselves? And then they've gone out and they've looked at it and they've done it. Medicine, food, art, society, we continue to evolve and advance until we create a world that we dream is possible. And so, get real is both a verb, get is really a verb and a command. Get dreams making, get real, make it happen. The irony and the concept of fake news and altering of facts and what I believe to be true, and that my opinion is as just as valid as someone else's, that whole era that has come to pass over the last 4 or 5, however many years, has nothing to do with the original meaning of the poem. I hope you understand that when I was writing Get Real and trying to imply that we need to not necessarily accept reality, I was talking about imagining a better future and not making stuff up to excuse behavior. So even though when some people read the poem and they might be thinking of fake news, or they might be thinking about all the other things that have been happening that have been less pleasant and have set us back, I'm hoping that a lot of people might hear this story and hear my hope for the poem and take it as it was originally meant. But again, I say to you writers, once you let something go, what somebody else does with it isn't necessarily your fault or your responsibility, but we can only do what we can do to make sure that the truth of what we say is heard, and that what I really meant by get real was for us to reflect on what's happened before, reflect on what's happening now, and make sure that if life isn't good enough, that if reality doesn't reflect the best of us, that we're the ones who have to get real and make it happen. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's Behind the Poem story about Get Real, and I hope to see you next week on my YouTube channel or on Instagram or on the Facebook page for my book Between Hindsight and Foresight. And until then, take care.